Yeah, hi. Is this Middlebrow?
What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Middlebrow podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Brian Park.
I'm Dan Rosen.
Dan, are you okay? Each time I see you, your clothes seem to be getting whiter and whiter. You're like a living, breathing Tim Robinson sketch. You don't understand. Look how wide it is.
Yeah, this shirt is definitely a shirt you would buy if you're planning to get pregnant and still wear the shirt.
When we first started this podcast, you were wearing skinny jeans.
I was never wearing skinny. Talking like Kevin Federline before we started. It's mostly just that the clothes that people send me are wider. And that's what I wear.
It looks good on you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
It's a little capacious.
I just noticed.
I didn't realize I'd be matching our guest today.
You're matching our guest.
No, I'm forcing myself to wear it because I bought this a long time ago. And it's, you have those items that you're like, when am I going to wear this? And I can't, there's no event that is worthy of the thing. And so I was like, all right, we have a lovely, beautiful, classy guest today. So, and then I'm going to a brand dinner after this at 11 Madison Park. So I'm like, great,
I'm just going to interject
Let's get this
here.
stained.
So for the people who are watching on YouTube, you will see Dan's shirt.
Yeah.
You are presenting this as if this is some completely batshit crazy shirt.
It's not that crazy.
Even before we recorded, you were like, can you tell what it is? I'm like, yeah, it's an oversized pink Oxford.
Yeah, no,
it looks fine.
It's slightly beyond my comfort zone, but it's good.
It's good. You're matching with our guest.
Yeah. We coordinated before. And you're wearing your usual.
My usual.
Grayish.
But I'm a little different now. I'm protein maxing.
Oh, you're protein maxing?
I met a nutritionist who said that the best way to combat anxiety is just to ingest tons of protein throughout the day.
There was a huge article that went viral that showed that all the protein.
You mean a TikTok?
No, it was an article. It was a real article that went viral that said that all the powders have huge amounts of lead. All the protein powders have psychotic amounts of lead in them.
No.
Huel. So this actually explains.
Oh, I've had that.
Yeah, that explains. Our podcast has slowly been you getting dumber, and it's because you've been ingesting lead.
Interesting.
And
that's a nice way to frame it. I thought I was just
silicon
becoming more and more comfortable in my own skin on this podcast.
I'm just kidding. So now your protein. What are you eating? Just like grilled chicken?
Well, I got a grill in my backyard.
Okay.
So I've been grilling a lot of proteins.
Jesus. This is slowly going to morph into the Andrew Huberman podcast.
Our audience will probably triple in size if I do that.
That's true.
But enough about us, Dan. Let's introduce our guest.
Yeah, I think it's time. Who's also protein maxing,
They're protein maxing.
Always.
Well, I want to talk about it. So, listeners, our guest this week is an author and an antiques evangelist. His words. Give it up for Michael Diaz-Griffith.
Thank you. I was excited to be on this podcast because I'm a listener, but now that I know that you've been overtaken by the protein mind virus, I'm a little worried, but I feel like we'll make it through.
No, we hook you. We hook you with like culture talk.
Yeah.
And this kind of highbrow.
Is it even highbrow?
No. Well, we talk about, it's Middlebrow. Yeah. With this Middlebrow and antiques. And then we slowly, push the trad
protein
agenda.
Content.
Yeah. The protein, the creatine.
Pink Oxford shirts.
Yeah.
Very,
Michael,
very
your
much.
vibe is a lot different in real life than what I've seen online.
IRL.
Yeah. You're a lot taller. Than
I get that a lot.
You're a lot taller, and you're given a Eckhouse Lotta Comme des Garçons kind of vibe right now.
Okay.
And all your
I'll take
images
that.
online, because I did research before this.
Yeah.
Full J-Press.
I would dispute that.
Okay.
I don't want to say that you haven't done your research, but I do a lot of code switching. I'll admit that.
Okay.
I'm not going to admit to borderline personality disorder, but I do kind of mix it up. And I think that's
So you won't say the N-word
really
with us.
enjoyable. Yeah. But I've always worn young brands, keep it surprising. But I
Okay.
do wear a lot of suits for work. It's true. So you probably spotted that.
I spotted a work uniform.
Yeah.
The first time I met you, I think you were in custom Bode at your book launch. Was a custom Bode suit?
Yeah, no, I was an early exponent of Bode and
Do you
Tanner
still wear it?
Fletcher, and I love brands that draw on history, draw on the history of costume, fashion, and sort of mix it up, And it could be like Bode, which in Emily's case isn't so much about creating new silhouettes or sort of experimenting formally. It's about reviving things, right? And sort of pulling them into a new context. But then if you look at, Simone Rocha or something, it's really about taking those traditional cues and making them contemporary, which I love.
I feel like, at least in terms of their storefronts, Bode does do the best kind of have a vision in terms of a tableau and creating a like a set piece almost for their clothes and using antiques, using different motifs and wood. Yeah.
And Aaron, whom I'm sure you guys know, Emily's husband, is such a close collaborator in making that happen.
Yeah.
I think it's really smart that they have a full scenography. You know, it's very sort of Ralph Lauren for the 21st century. So
that's sweet. Someone has to
smart.
replace him. You saying it's not Aime Leon Dore?
Oh, well, no comment. No comment.
You have to comment, Michael.
Well, you know, I
have
think,
to.
but I think that, you know, the bigger picture here isn't just reinventing Americana or having sort of a sweeping panoramic vision for the brand. It's also about doing something genuinely new in your cultural moment. And whatever we think about the status of, you know, a Bode in 2025, when it started, it was the only game in town in terms of what Emily was doing. And I mean, she's been copied by so many.
Yeah, you go to Zara.
Which is just, you know, evidence that she had a brilliant idea. But I think she's continuing to evolve it in a cool way.
Do you think that the perception of a brand as it shifts can affect the thing itself? Like the way it exists in the culture, the people who wear it, the pervasiveness of it. Yeah, does that change the essence of it and how we relate to it? Or can things be static? Can we ever see them outside of like their vibe?
I fucking love you. Yeah. No, I don't think it necessarily changes the essence of the thing itself, you know, not to get too philosophical, but I do think it changes the brand positioning.
Yeah.
And then you are in dialogue suddenly with perceptions of the brand and not just the product, right? Which I think Bode has certainly been a subject of. You know, the sort of tension or difference between what she's doing and how the product is being consumed can be pretty wide at times.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think that it is cool when there's a feedback loop and a designer starts kind of responding to their audience. I mean, I don't know. I'm still thinking about this sort of Taylor Swift big album launch that is going to date this podcast episode. But, you know, I just think so often when I see her name come up that she is a confessional lyricist, right? Yeah. And if you've ever thought about confessional poetry or songwriting, it's not about an ideological manifesto. It's not about being consistent in terms of your intellectual position from moment to moment. It's about the moment you're writing in, right? And it's so interesting, for example, in her case, to see lyrics that are probably from her perspective, just describing a moment in time, be consumed as like manifestos or as official statements. And certainly interpreted that way.
But I think Taylor Swift is so big. I don't trust anything that she's writing is truly confessional or authentic. I feel like all of her lyrics must have gone through multiple rounds of A/B testing to ensure like the most engagement.
And like PR consultants and...
I don't know. I think all really good art and design goes through many iterative cycles. That sort of expressivist
but do you think there are
dream
like
is a teenage
involved?
fantasy. Well, I hope there are with some of it. But I mean, I'm talking about the tradition of confessional songwriting, right? This idea that if I have a feeling today that, you know, like I fucking hate the color red, I could write a song about that. And tomorrow I might like the color red, right? It doesn't mean that I have been ideologically inconsistent. I was describing my feeling on one day, and maybe the next day I didn't feel that way anymore. You know, anyway, I think it's interesting to think about, you know, just the context of production versus a context of reception. And that actually plays into some of my thinking about antiques. So we can talk about that later.
I want to dive into it. Wait, so Dan, a couple episodes ago when you said you hate anime, does that still hold true
I didn't
today?
say I hate anime. I just have never gotten into it because I'm an adult. And
so you say.
So I say. So I only watch anime porn. That's what adults watch.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what an adult.
Very
I'm
thin
sophisticated.
line. It's a very thin line.
Very thin, quivering line.
Quivering is really the key word there.
Yeah.
Okay, so you are here to proselytize me into the Church of Antiques.
You didn't realize that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'll accept the challenge.
So is antiquing, thrifting, it's all the same?
No, I mean, there are distinctions to be made. And one of the fun things about being on this podcast for me is that I'm not in a museum. I'm not at an elite art fair. So we can kind of ignore those distinctions. You know, we can just talk about old shit, which is what I love and love talking about. But there are distinctions. I mean, antiques traditionally are objects that are 100 years old or older. Vintage, historically, was 30 years or older.
Oh.
Those terms have kind of collapsed. And one really interesting problem for today is that as we reach the 1920s, in terms of that date line for what constitutes an antique, we're hitting the industrial age in earnest. We're hitting the First World War. We've actually hit it already, but like we've kind of, production was starting back up in the early 1920s. In 20 years, once we get to the sort of World War II era, in terms of this window for what constitutes an antique, the type of hand craftsmanship that has traditionally defined the qualities of what an antique is are all but gone in the production that is most interesting from that period.
Yeah.
So
like an Eames chair isn't a
Yeah. So does
antique.
mid-century modern shift from being called vintage to being called antique? Or did that word antique have to do fundamentally with hand craftsmanship? I mean, this is a totally academic, silly
that
question,
is
but there are a lot of
interesting.
things like
we're
that
ending.
to think
We're
about.
Antiques, we finished them.
Yeah, like we're finally hitting the 1920s in the antiques world.
Yeah.
This gets at the idea that there are distinctions in that world.
Yeah.
And there is a difference between, thrifting, going to an estate sale, going to an auction, going to an art fair. And in the context of antiques, one of the biggest differences between fairs is vetting. So that is when curators, dealers, and other experts examine every object in a show for authenticity, date, and condition. And at the world's best antiques fairs, that happens. And so
Yeah.
everything is what it's purported to be. It's been checked.
And do you
that's
believe it, or is there still like rife with fakes?
No, I'm one of the few people on the planet who's run a vetted fair. And
Yeah.
so I know
So you see
how
what goes
strict
into
it
it.
is. Yeah.
So
there are
they-
only a couple that are vetted still.
Are there experts on each object, on like porcelain?
It's incredible. I mean, I have like my file of ideas for a novel.
Yeah.
The vetting procedure is absolutely in the file.
what goes into it?
So you assemble committees for each discipline. And so different fairs can define the disciplines a little differently, but you have porcelain, and that could constitute different periods, but experts in porcelain. Then you could also have committees made of experts in certain periods. So you could have, experts on Renaissance paintings or on Americana generally throughout the ages. There are different types of committees based on the way that discipline works, but you're trying to find a really lively, almost a group of rivals who can sort of debate within themselves, who will bring different perspectives to the vetting procedure.
This is like 12 Angry Men.
Yeah, hell yeah. And
Have
then-
you ever had a contentious? What was there
Fisticuffs.
ever fisticuffs?
No. I've had a fist fight.
Is this a global community too? Or
No,
is
I
this-
mean, so it's actually quite easy
Over
to
like
talk
an old
about
doll,
because it's specific.
This stuffy
I
old
love
people
it.
get into a fight over a doll.
Well, not quite dolls, but
okay, yeah. What's an
they
example?
could. I mean, in theory. So there was a fair in London called the Grosvenor House Fair, and it
Okay.
was the great antiques fair. Started in the early 20th century, and it was kind of the standard bearer for quality, or what constituted quality in the world of antiques and historic art. They really developed the vetting procedure, which involves having these committees who examine all the objects and sign off on them. And then that spread to other shows in the UK, eventually to the Winter Show in New York City, which I'm still involved in, and also to TAFAF Maastricht, the great fair that happens every year in the Netherlands. And there's a spring edition here. But what's interesting about these committees is they're not just charged with throwing things off the floor. They also talk to the dealers about what they have. I mean, and ask them questions. And so it's often kind of a learning experience for everyone involved. So if the committee says, listen, we love this object, we know that it's right, but we're thinking more 1660, not 1680. What do you
And
think?
is that how much money is the difference between that?
No, like the year that it was
no,
produced.
no. But like, is there a huge
It
even
is, but
monetary difference, or is it just
there
like
can be. There
like,
certainly
this is
can
more rare
be,
to have this from 1660?
but it could also go in the other direction. And the committee could actually say, listen, this is actually from an implied sense, the better year.
Right.
But they're really not concerned in the immediate sense with money. These are people who are scholarly. They've written papers on the material. Often, especially at European fairs, they're curators themselves. So they're trying to make sure that this limited number of objects that's circulating through the world, because there's not an unlimited supply of antiques and historic art. I mean, we have an ever dwindling supply. Things
where
get
do they
destroyed.
Where do we, some like old Nazi dies and we find a bunch of like stuff they took?
We shake your apartment out. A few old things are shaken out. But then if you were a collector, a certain number of those go into museum collections. And so actually the amount of historic material that's on the market or circulating in private hands is constantly getting smaller.
So we won't need these experts anymore because we've already have the, everything's already been verified.
But this is really interesting because connoisseurship was such a focus in the 20th century. That's, the whole practice of learning what's good, better, and best in a given category, really training your eye and learning how to be a good collector, including for people who are just collecting for fun. Connoisseurship and connoisseurship studies were really important. And they still are. And I'm writing a book on connoisseurship now. I think we need a sort of new approach, but I think we need it. But one of the nice things that happened is, for once, the baby boomers did us a favor, I have to say. And that generation did so much scholarship and put so much on record about not just specific objects, but about whole disciplines, identifying carvers, identifying painters who'd previously been anonymous in our records, that we do have a much more dependable sort of record or source to go to when we're trying to identify things.
This is what happens when you don't have to have like 5 jobs to pay rent. You have time to
and it means we can be a little lazier, you know? And it means that we can also mix things more. There are people in the 50s who were obsessed with collecting one specific kind of thing, partly because they had to research it so deeply. It became an obsession on the sort of research side, but they didn't have time to figure out other categories. Whereas now, we kind of know what things are.
Wait, I want to rewind a little. So you were born and raised in Alabama.
Yes, rural Alabama.
How did you even get into all of this?
It's a very long and winding path. I lived in Budapest. I lived in India. I married a Mexican and found out I was adopted. Lots of stories.
Wow.
Because I'm from the Tennessee William Faulkner part of the South.
Okay.
My great-grandparents had an outhouse with a little half moon, window in it. So it's a wild world. It's very authentic. Oh, baby, if you decontextualized that outhouse and brought it to New York with some sob story about being a queer Southerner,
that's in the MoMA. Put that in the MoMA.
Put it in the MoMA. Send me the check. But I found my way to London eventually and started working a little bit in the art market there, in fairs. And eventually when I moved to New York, that's what I started doing in earnest. And I worked at the Winter Show. I've worked with many, many cultural institutions, galleries, auction houses since then. And now I write about collecting, but no, I did graduate studies. Okay. So I did graduate studies at King's College London and the Courtauld Institute in Literature and Art History. And then I did a connoisseurship course at Sotheby's that was a year-long course, which was amazing. It no longer exists in the same format, but it was completely devoted to object-based study. So this is no theory. I'd done that. It's just trying to figure out when the pot is from, or tasting samples of wood to understand what different types of wood taste like.
What?
So you can bite an antique if you need to figure out what it's made of.
Who are these freaks eating wood?
Connoisseurs, baby.
Connoisseurs.
Yeah.
The scope just seems so wide.
Yeah.
It's just so much that you need to know.
And there are specialists, right, who focus on a specific discipline. And I could have been one of those, but I decided to be a generalist and to work, more on the market side and on the public side of things to kind of share the big picture with people so that they could dive in. But, once you dive in, whether as a student or as a collector, you can hyper-focus, and that's really cool. I know people who have white cube apartments and they collect one type of thing, and maybe they just have a few great examples,
like
but that's it.
Apartment.
Yeah.
Where it just has like a sarcophagus.
That's it, which, I love that. But there's a lot to explore, and in the more academic side of this world, there's a term called material culture, which is actually useful because it describes the totality of all of these objects and really even the built environment. Like, what is it? It's our culture. It's our cultural patrimony in material form. And so that's kind of the lens.
Is the market growing or is it in decline?
So the market has been in decline.
Okay.
I'll use the passive voice very intentionally there.
Okay.
There was an antiques boom between the 70s and the very early 2000s. And that's when the baby boomers flourished as dealers, as specialists, as collectors. And I can talk a lot about that period. There's like a little pen portrait of it at the front of my book because I'm trying to explain like the background of the antiques world that we've inherited. We being like young people in huge scare quotes.
Yeah.
Right.
And what were
Because
like
I'm
the
39.
hot objects? Like what were like the obsessions of the boomers in terms of antiques?
So it depends on the region. But in New York, for example, there were a couple that were really important. So in the sort of Park Avenue, Fifth Avenue world, it was absolutely English furniture. You know, in very traditional 18th and 19th century antiques and historic art. Kind of what you think about when you think of antiques. What's interesting, though, is that was not a part of an unbroken tradition of collecting. I mean, most of the people who were collecting that material then were nouveau riche people. They were Jews. They were queer people. You know, some of them had no sort of inheritance at all. And so they bought the types of things that were being decanted from English country houses. And they brought them to America and created these fabulous, you know, Mario Bawada designed apartments using those collections. So that's one pillar. Another one was Americana. And I love that. I think Americana is great.
Which is like the
folk art,
the Bode tradition.
very much what Emily loves. And that's, you know, everything from painted American furniture, country style things, to weather vanes, quilts, also huge. And what really happens is those are hot markets. I mean, genuinely hot. It's pretty easy to get into dealing. So a lot of the dealers today that we think of as really elite, they started out as hippies in the 70s. And when the antiques market began to decline, a lot of them were a little caught out because they'd never had to do marketing or sort of think about advertising. All of that is normie, boring business stuff, you know?
Right.
They just had the goods and people came
They had
to
the
them.
goods and they had the personalities, they're storytellers, and maybe they were good at wining and dining billionaires or millionaires at the time, but they weren't typical business people. And so when the field began to demand more effort from the dealers, I think it was really hard for some of them. But to go back to the bigger picture, began to decline after the advent of the internet, which I can talk about, after 9/11, and it really cratered after the financial crash. So I came into an antiques world that was very depressed and in every sense,
They're like,
groping
"Save us,
around
young
for energy.
man."
No, and I was
You look hip.
always the youngest person in every room, and you hear people theorizing about what young people want, and those theories are always wrong. So my point of view,
Labubu's.
Do you
want
remember
Labubu's.
any of these theories at the time?
well, there's still one that I have to interact with almost every single day. And I hate to get into generational theory as if it's an accurate thing. I mean, I want to say like very clearly, there are exceptions to every rule. So when I talk now about baby boomers or Gen X or millennials or Gen Z, there are exceptions in every category. But in general, what they would say is like millennials like IKEA and they're minimalists. And that is such a misconception, and it has been from the beginning of my time in the antiques world, because those people, those sort of very seasoned antiques dealers, curators, etc., they were really talking about Gen X. So they were talking about their children who are older than millennials, sort of Mark Ronson age and above.
Yeah.
Right.
And despite the amazing skincare routine. And that was the generation, you know, let's just think about JFK Jr. and Carolyn Bessette Kennedy, who helped crack open the market for mid-century modern, which really rose to prominence as a collecting category in the 90s. And they were also the pioneers in a way of minimalism, you know, as a mass aesthetic.
Well, when people say that millennials like love whatever gray, like the millennial gray aesthetic, well, that's actually just Gen X. Like they're designing the apartment and
that's the
selling it.
afterlife of Gen X taste.
Yeah.
Exactly. And millennials from the very beginning, if you look at consumer patterns, the messiness of MySpace, you know, if you really dial it all the way
Right.
back to that period, have always been chaotic, have always been eclectic, have always loved pattern, color. You know, you can even think about this in middle America as like millennial girls shopping in Anthropologie. You know, they were not minimalists. And those veins still exist and they're interesting. But in general, a millennial sensibility is a lot more open to weird shit. They love color and pattern. And when they come into their buying power, they will start buying antiques. And they have.
They have.
Well, I was going to say the buying power is the asterisk for me because
It's my
millennials-
asterisk.
Yeah, millennials don't make as much money as their parents do, so it's like
Now they do, I think, right?
You've like
We're starting to. We're getting
gaslit
there.
ourselves into accepting
Yeah.
like minimalism as the pervasive aesthetic.
Yeah, when in fact, that is just us being broke as fuck.
Yeah.
But we are starting to come into our buying power, generationally speaking, and the contemporary art market has
and
obviously
those fucking boomers are
cratered.
going to die. We're going to get all their money.
And that's happening. Exactly. And so now is an amazing moment because the prices are still right for historic art and antiques.
Okay,
You know,
you
the
gotta tell us
market is
off camera what to
rebounding,
buy.
but it's very early in the rebound. And yet we're just making enough money as a generation to start buying into this stuff. And the funny thing is, collecting has never been a young person's game. So we're actually on schedule. And that's what's funny. Like we were being asked, not you guys, but like in those meetings, I was being asked as a 27-year-old to like save collecting. The fact is, even among baby boomers, people didn't really begin collecting until traditionally their kids were a little older. You know, like in high school, your kids go off to boarding school if you're rich and you start spending weekends in Connecticut antiquing. It was never something that people in their 20s and 30s were known to do as a sort of generational practice.
Well, it's also like you have 5 roommates in Bushwick. Don't you want to start collecting Indian dolls?
That will get knocked off the shelf.
porcelain.
While so-and-so is making ramen.
Yeah.
No, it's...
I mean, how
it's-
much of that is just also space? Like is there... I wonder if there's a relationship between the housing market and how unaffordable housing is. Like we all live in little boxes, and housing is more expensive than ever. Like you do need space and wall space and mantles. I don't know who has a mantle.
Yeah, no, I think those sociological things are real, buying power, square footage. But I'll be honest, I think in the history of taste, there are cycles. There just are. The pendulum swings back and forth. And the pendulum is always swinging back and forth between, minimalism and decluttering and negative space and breathing room and, eclecticism, layering, pattern, warmth. And we're just sort of in the middle of a pendulum swing back towards the latter.
Much like the size of my pants over the
Yeah.
years.
You're getting, yours are getting bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
All of our pants have gotten
Got
bigger.
bigger.
And
Yeah.
we're
Pants just
recovering.
I think Sam Hyde talked about clothes just get bigger and smaller. It's the same thing.
Completely.
It's
And
like
the silhouettes just come in and out. And what I always say is, we live on a ball of rock floating in outer space. We don't know how we got here. We're kept alive by this gigantic hydrogen bomb that is just eternally sparking off in the sky and creating the conditions for life. Like Tiffany lamps can come back. Do you know what I mean when I'm talking to someone who's older and they're like, young people are never going to like this stuff again. I'm so disappointed. And it's like, give it a few years. It always comes back because...
Maybe the AI would love kitschy stuff like Tiffany lamps. Who
I'm
knows?
afraid that AI does. In fact,
What if AI
but-
had just really corny, campy taste?
I mean, so far, I think that
That's true.
thesis has been proven to be true.
But once AI has it, what's AI's buying power? Once that in about 50 years, then what if it starts just collecting?
Well, you're reaching another idea, which is that I think Gen Z is even more attuned to physical objects, to their attraction, to print media, to film photography, right, than millennials were. So, and it's because they were raised on devices. So, what are your desires directed to? What's considered cool? I mean, in general, there's been a shift in taste towards the sort of physical and material world, and that really suits a person like me who wants to see people collecting.
Collective sigh of relief now that Marie Kondo is not relevant anymore?
There's a collective sigh of relief in my household. But I'll say, you can have a very clean home with a lot of negative space and still collect. And I myself have probably shifted over the past decade towards being a bit of a maximalist. and liking to see a lot of layers in my living space to wanting more of that, space to breathe. And I like to see more negative space around the objects I collect now. I really want to see them and to allow them to have their sort of erratic presence unmediated by other objects.
Yeah.
That could be me getting old, but I think, you can have it both ways. You could have a really complex, funky object and isolate it in space in a way that, kind of keeps you calm and doesn't feel hectic.
So for someone like me, I don't look towards the past. Just like as a general principle of being, where like I don't dwell on past decisions. I'm just like always, I'm looking forward.
Love that for you.
I want like a Japanese Toto self-cleaning bidet. Like give me the maximum technology.
Yeah.
If it has an LED light, I'm in. What am I missing out on then? What is your sales pitch to someone like me where collecting an antiquity, nowhere near this whole space in my head?
Yeah, you're talking to the entire city of San Francisco now.
Wow,
basically.
I love it. Okay. Including all the Waymos and the robots themselves.
Love Waymo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'd say a couple of things to this. One, all of these objects we've been discussing are our common cultural patrimony. I mean, whether you like to think about it or not, that stuff belongs to us as humanity. We can talk about private property later, but I'm also talking about stuff that's in museums, that you can go visit. Because my goal isn't for everybody just to buy things. It's also about appreciating the stuff that's in museums, understanding how it's ours. It wasn't just Marie Antoinette's. Like that amazing craftsmanship, the cultural traditions embedded in objects, those are things and stories that belong to us. And I think one of our biggest mistakes is thinking that the past represents conservatism and that the present moment represents something inherently progressive or radical. Could not be further from the truth. A lot of the most radical ideas and experiments in living are in the past. And as you guys have seen, as we've all seen, conservatism of all sorts can kind of creep back up on you after being in abeyance. So number one, I would say it's all ours to enjoy, whether you own it or whether you're just looking at it and thinking about it, giving it your time. And a lot of the objects that you might think of as like symbols of the past in a negative way are really survivors of times and places where crazy ideas were being developed, cultures were vastly different from our own. And those stories that they offer us are like a canvas, for developing new ideas, sharpening our thinking, being transported to other worlds. Some objects are like sci-fi. You're like, how did like the Mayan civilization get to this point? How did they decide that's how an eye is represented? Or if you're looking at an object from a society that was matriarchal, like you can really go deep in thinking about, wow, so the spoons are shaped differently in a matriarchal culture. Why is that? I mean, you can really go to some crazy places. And I think that when you start having those conversations, someone like you who wants the Toto self-cleaning toilet can start to open out to them, and you start to appreciate the material culture from the perspective of that kind of more open way of thinking about it.
Well, it also feels like a sterile way to live. And I feel like that's what also the Gen Z...
That's it.
The Gen Z need for, like, they're buying CD players and, like, there's... I know there's a soulless emptiness that you feel when like all your belongings, all your ideas are like owned by Apple and Spotify, and you're like offloading everything. And IKEA, furniture is like minimal and exists to be destroyed and to barely, it can't even hold your record player because it's going to break. So it can only hold like an iPod or like a UE Boom speaker or whatever. That's what it's built for. And I feel like you're offloading everything onto like a corporate structure, and you're like, well, what actually am I?
Correct.
Like, I don't actually exist. It's like a homeless person who hoards things because they're like, that's how you feel human. You have like a home and you own things. And if you're at home and you just have this basic gray couch and your movies are, you have no movies, you have no taste, you have no books, then like what actually are you as a human being?
Yeah, I'll take it further. I mean, there's a sort of hysterical mania that can develop around all of this newness. You have a gray sofa and it, gets, I don't know, snagged or something, and because it's not well made, because it wasn't crafted by humans, blah, 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 you basically have to replace the whole thing if you don't want the snag there. Whereas in a well-made object, including a historic one, you can have it recovered, so like you don't have to be on like snag alert.
But when I'm on Snag Alert, I just tell my Google Home to call TaskRabbit.
There you go.
To
And they'll
get
come and
someone
fix
to
it.
patch it up.
You're reminding me though of something else, which is, so I'm obsessed with how the UK is like the mirror world of the US and vice versa. Like things are just, slightly different in all of these ways that can be a little uncanny. In the context of like just family life in the UK, things are just a little messier in a way that's wonderful. Like even in the most upper class, quote unquote, home, like there are tea mugs in the sink that have like tea stains in them. The sisal or seagrass or apple matting in the front hall is like, rough around the edges
There's
from
like a
like the
grit.
dog chewing at it. There's a grit. And you can even relate this to the way, elites there live. They go out in the mud in their wellies and they come in and they put those on the coat hanger and the water drips down. And it's kind of an indoor-outdoor way of living. You just accept the weather shit. And, and we have homes that are kind of our safe place from all that weather, but they're not insulated totally from it. And one of the most uncanny things I see in interior design in the US is when we recreate that look, the like English country house look, but we do it in this extremely sterile, hermetically sealed American way.
Yeah.
So it's like maybe even the same carpet is being specified, the same materials down to the brand, but in an American household, especially if it's very elite, it's like, oh my God, the carpet got stained, it has to get replaced. And I do think that when you have this sort of way of living where everything's new and everything has to get to be perfect,
It's like
it
a
gets
mausoleum.
neurotic. It gets neurotic. And living with antiques, you do accept like, wow, okay, this thing's beaten up. It's survived for 200 years. It's going to keep going after I'm dead. And so, yeah, I can set down my coffee cup on it and not be so precious. And it's actually the opposite of what a lot of people think about antiques, because they think probably that living with antiques would
It's really delicate.
Not
and
at
you need
all.
to baby it. Yeah.
If it's a hardier sort of antique, then you can do whatever you want with it because it's survived this long. And that stuff was well built, before industrial manufacture became as common as it is now. If it's something very fine, this is for all the billionaires listening, it's completely fine to use it in a normal way because the restoration expertise that's available to repair that furniture is now perfect. I mean, anything can be repaired. So you can
But
really
then when
live
does it
with that
become
stuff.
no longer an antique? How many times does it have to be repaired for it to
That's-
like ship of Theseus?
Yeah.
Do you have to adjudicate that as well?
At a vetted fair, at the level of quality that we just discussed, the ship of Theseus types of antiques aren't as big of a deal. But there was a dealer in New York in the 90s who was really known for doing that. And it is a kind of funny question, like how much can be replaced until its essence is lost. And
genre chairs are like insanely popular, but they're completely reupholstered. The cane is all new.
the
and redone.
Chandigarh chairs.
Yeah, the Chandigarh chairs. Yeah, and, I mean, there's that great movie that Amy Siegel made, Provenance. Yeah,
The thing about those that's really interesting is that, they were designed to be open source, right? They were designed to be easily built by Indian furniture workshops. And the idea was that the pattern would be adopted actually throughout India at civil service sort of administrative offices. And so,
and then to end up in Kris Jenner's home too, right?
and then to end up in Kris Jenner's home. And as like the sort of iconic symbol of cliched taste and design, like the ultimate expression of, quote, middlebrow, as I would think of it. And it's sad because it's not only a beautiful design, but it also had a really powerful and I think successful social intent, which is that they would be cheap and easy to produce so that
And
good
for
design
civic,
could, for the civic good, to have, beautiful, easily made chairs for everyone to enjoy.
Yeah.
And now it's the opposite. Although there is a brand that makes them in India, and I like that they're doing that. So I really think there is an ethical way to buy those, even in an unlicensed way, maybe, unlike other mid-century products, because they were always meant to be open source. And so as long as the manufacturer is in India and is making money there, I think it's kind of a cool part of the story.
Do you own anything where if people knew the history of the item, they would want to get you canceled?
Ooh. I don't think so, but I do own some portrait miniatures, and one or two of those are painted on ivory, which is no longer a material that we would use for that kind of painting. It's also very difficult now to deal in objects that contain ivory, which is a hard topic because
with like tariffs or like other
no restrictions, because of course there are laws now restricting the movement and the trading of ivory based products from today.
So the old stuff falls into that as well.
Well, it's just because the law is not fully literate in the antiques trade. So a lot of amazing dealers and curators have spent years now advocating on behalf of that historic material. I mean, it's even been threatened with destruction because there are certain jurisdictions that destroy ivory.
Right.
Can't
materials.
a man sell some tusks?
Can't what?
Can a guy just sell a few tusks?
Well, you know what? They're not tusks, though. It's like a
ivory
piece
isn't
of
a tusk?
furniture with ivory marquetry.
Yeah.
Or it's a portrait miniature from the 19th century that was painted on ivory. So it's crazy to take that object and throw it in a burn pit. It just is.
It's
but
history. We did it. We killed the animal already.
Yeah, it's dead.
It's very dead. And the person who made it is also dead. They were punished.
That's it. And for the fashion people, it's exactly like vintage furs. If you're going to buy fur, if you're buying vintage fur, there's an argument for it, right?
Yeah.
Is there a whole black market for these kinds of goods? Like if you are someone who deals Nazi paraphernalia
Or like Confederate stuff, I'm sure. Like
Yeah. Well, there's a podcast called The Rest is History. Have you guys heard of that?
Yeah.
Very popular. Dominic Sandbrook is one of the presenters. He talked about traveling in, I think, Bulgaria in the late 90s in his backpacking years, which we all had, but mine weren't quite in that period. And he remembers seeing a dealer of Soviet paraphernalia and ephemera who had like a back room that he would invite backpackers to say like, you like the Soviet material, come and look at this.
Yeah.
And it was Nazi material with
in for a Stalin,
in for a Stalin. And the thing though is, in general, it's the Nazi looted art that's the bigger issue there, right? As opposed to the illicit trading of like Nazi war medals or whatever.
Right.
And there has been a lot of work done to identify the Nazi looted art. A lot of museum collections now clearly mark if there's even a question about an object. And that and restitution, they're topics that have really gained a lot of traction. And institutions especially think about them a lot more than they used to. I'll say in my collection quickly, though, one thing I like to emphasize is that when we talk about antiques or, historic art in kind of the broad strokes way, we often think about the context of reception. To kind of go back to the beginning of our conversation, we think about the owner of the furniture or of the dress, right? The Marie Antoinette or the Scarlett O'Hara who sat on the chair, who wore the dress in the Civil War. And, that's legitimate if an object was owned by an enslaver or an evil king, that's a part of its story. And we need to understand that. But a lot of what I try to do is to shift the focus to the person who made the object and that, the context of production. And for me, this is a really powerful thing because, you can talk about who owned a quilt, but you can also talk about who made the quilt. And in so many cases,
who painted the lawn jockey? Let's
well, and who built the amazing, structure that the horses were housed in, and that is a part of architectural history. And sort of retrieving those stories, I think, is one of the exciting things that younger collectors can do. as they research the objects that they're collecting or that they want to collect. It's really interesting. And if you talk about New York, for example, you can talk about, a famous maker of furniture like Duncan Phyfe, but then you can also look at who was in his workshop. And in the case of New York City, a lot of the best furniture makers in the early 19th century were Black, and their stories were not told in the past, and they're starting to be. So, you can always sort of pivot the question and try to make the focus the talents and the very skilled people who produce the work instead of the people that you'd get canceled for
for the association.
for associating with. And it's the more interesting question, I think, in a lot of cases. It's also why I think younger people are interested in craft and collectible design. It's like our interest in art and fashion. We're interested in how it's made and what the ideas are behind it, rather than just like how it lands with consumers.
So let's say I want to get into antiquing.
Yeah,
I've decided.
let's do it.
I've decided. I have the bug. Okay, I have the urge. I'm like, I want to.
My evangelism has succeeded.
Yeah, you've won.
I've Jerry Falwell'd you into
There are,
antiquing.
beyond there just being like infinite categories that I could get into. How do I know I'm not getting completely fucked in terms of bamboozled, not just from fakes, but like overcharge or what is how is even it determined like what is a good version of this thing, of this chinois, whatever, this vase, this tea cozy that I've decided to collect. Like where do you even begin with that?
This is why I'm writing my next book.
Okay.
Yeah, because the first one was about saying like, you like this stuff, don't you? Like, look at it. Isn't it cool?
The first book was The New Antiquarians.
The New Antiquarians, and also to show, frankly, older people that like this is happening. Younger people are collecting. The next one will be about this topic.
Okay.
And it really is about connoisseurship. I mean, you do want to kind of know what you're looking at. And the very first reason is so you don't overpay. Yeah. So what I'll say is, it's great to start collecting in a low stakes environment, right? So if you're at a flea market or an estate sale or at Brimfield, which I know you guys were recently talking about, and you're looking at material that's less expensive, you can take risks and you can make mistakes. And what's nice about that is you can start to develop the habit and the practice of collecting, negotiating for objects, without feeling like a big mistake is going to derail you.
Can you haggle? Is it cool to haggle?
You can absolutely haggle.
Okay. I don't think I have the balls to haggle. I'm a coward.
Yeah.
I haggle myself. I'm like, no, that's too low.
What you shouldn't do is like try to haggle like 50% off of the object, right? If the person you're talking to were loaded, they would not be sitting there in the rain selling you something under, beneath a tarp.
Okay, so what's the rough, like, what's the, let's say something's $500. What can my opening bid be?
I mean, you could be bold.
Depends how much riz you have, Dan.
Be bold and go for 20%, Okay,
20% is good.
But I would say it is about how much riz you have, but it's about how much you know. And what's fun is you start to develop confidence as you do more of that. But I would give myself a nice big wide sandbox to play in before I start trying to collect really expensive things.
Yeah. Have you ever gotten a steal?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Because I know what I'm doing.
But then do you feel bad? You're like, oh, I kind of fucked this person.
No.
Like this person didn't know they had.
No. On that level, it's a bit of a game.
Okay.
I mean, and it's a game that both are playing. And I think it's ethical to, get a good deal.
Yeah. I need an AI.
Like, what's the gateway drug for antiques? For most, like, basic.
I mean, I think for a lot of
people
people now, it's actually vintage or archival fashion. I think that's a gateway drug. And what's hilarious is when people are sitting there in like 90s Yoji or something, and they're like, I don't like old things. I'm like, bitch, what you're wearing is 30 years old. It's you're already participating in the market that circulates old things
the aura
into the present
of the past.
And that have, and aura is the word. I mean, there is an erratic presence that really does develop with age and as objects pass through multiple hands. But to get back to this question, I would start small. I would research the things that I find myself to be interested in, but that could be as simple as a Google search because there's a lot of material and information online now. And then I would say the next The next level would be shopping at auction, which is super fun. And if you go to the regional auction houses, I'm not talking about Sotheby's and Christie's at this level, but like mom and pop auction houses that you can find all over the country.
I'm not going to pay $250 for the tent. Did you see that?
No.
There's that Sotheby's has an auction for fabrics,
Sotheby's,
and you have to pay $250 just to even enter the tent to look at the objects.
Yeah,
for
the
a
ticking
breakfast,
tent.
like, the ticking tent,
which is being run by a couple friends of mine. Sotheby's is a sponsor. Sotheby's is a sponsor.
So often.
But that's not really an antiques fair. There are some antiques there.
Okay.
That's like a whole other
Okay.
design industry topic.
Okay, so you go to
Do you
antiques
guys want to have me back to talk about the design industry?
Yeah.
I'll wear a suit.
Okay.
I just feel like I
But-
can never outsmart the market. Like, for instance, I'm really into vintage Levi's. And
Yeah.
there's just a collective knowledge where I never have found a deal.
Well-
because everyone knows the things to know that makes it valuable.
Yeah, no, and that's a real thing because there's so much information now.
Right.
But I'll say that what's really interesting as you develop some degree of comfort with this stuff is that you go on a little bit of a journey, if you'll pardon the cliche, and you begin discovering your eye. And the more things you look at, the more you think about these things, you refine that eye. And I don't mean refine in the sense of becoming more sophisticated. I mean, you really develop laser vision about the things you like, whether it's about form, color, pattern, period, etc. And that leads you to discover things that other people are not looking at or that are out of fashion. And I mean, what you're describing, I'm
But then
sorry
it's
to
just
say
your
it,
own taste. It's not.
it's discovering your own taste. And what's interesting,
I have normie basic taste is what you were saying.
there's more of the journey left for you to complete. You're kind of like
I'm scared. What if the
There's
journey
more
leads
of
me
the
you're kind
to
of the
journey
friend?
Bilbo Baggins of,
Wow, I love
antiques
that,
at this moment. But
love
you know,
that
once
undercut.
once you really go down that path, you'll discover lots of things that no one else is looking at.
What if
and
I'm scared? What if the journey leads me to the AI friend necklace?
I'll hold your hand. We'll go. Do you know what? Stay in physical reality. So go to an auction preview in Connecticut or in Pennsylvania. Look at the stuff in person. Make sure that it's not like miniature stuff, which
Sure.
can happen, just like it can happen on like Amazon or eBay or whatever. Make sure
yeah,
it's not
yeah.
tiny, unless you want that. And pick it up, hold it, you know, really get a feel for things, train yourself, and then, you know, as you buy more and more of that stuff, I think your fear will dissipate. But I'm not saying to become a big consumer, you know, to become a shopper. I'm saying instead of buying a coffee table from IKEA, maybe try to buy your coffee table from a regional auction house. You know, can be reasonable.
And so, okay, auction house is the next level. What's like the boss? Like, what's the Jedi level? Like, I
Eye of Sauron.
I have full control over all my faculties.
Absolutely.
I'm a killer. I'm not this, you know.
That's the winter show.
Okay.
That's TAFAF. And the cool thing
not
is
like estate fairs?
At that, not if you want the Sauron level.
Okay.
But what I'll say quickly is those fairs are selling venues for the dealers, right? I mean, they exist for the dealers to be able to come together under one roof with a critical mass of collectors. What's really amazing about those fairs is that you're not so much on guard about the quality, authenticity, date of things. You know that the material is right. So you can really focus on cultivating relationships with the dealers, learning their stories. And then when the fair is not happening, they become your buddies, you know? So it's all about visiting their gallery during sort of the off season or having dinner with them and hearing what they've just discovered.
Sending them funny memes.
Sending them funny memes. I mean, maybe even more. Maybe sexting a
Yeah,
little,
sexting with the
depending on
dealer.
the nature of
Okay.
your relationship. And then when
Sex
they find
the dealer is the advice.
sex the dealer,
Yeah.
and then when
Show
they find
hole.
something really multiple,
Multiple, yeah.
when they get something really rare or unusual or special, then they contact you,
Yeah.
you know, and then you have that sort of direct line.
Because they know that this is the thing that you collect, you're into.
Yeah.
You're a freak for this.
You're a freak for this. And here's the thing. Unlike the VIC people at the luxury brands, these dealers are just doing it out of passion. I mean, it's not the most remunerative profession at this point. If we're talking about historic art and antiques, and they're really trying to find the freaks out there who also are interested in this stuff. Yes, they need to earn a living, but the market is not in a place right now for them to make crazy money. So it really is about, covering their expenses, making a reasonable little margin, and then getting it into someone's home or life where the object's circulating, it's off their books. It might even circulate back to that dealer, if you want to get rid of the object one day. But it's not, I would say it's not as kind of nefarious a profession as we sometimes imagine, because our ideas about, the antiques trade are a little bit rooted in that boom period when there were more, I don't want to say bad actors, but, people who are making a lot of money at it. They're not now. They're really passionate, and they're just trying to find other passionate people.
Well, can you give us an example of a freaky object that still makes a little margin, and they can still show up to these big fairs?
Oof. I mean, at Frieze Masters last week, the dealer Peter Feiner, who's the world's foremost dealer of armor, had this insane kind of prosthetic hand, like an articulated metal glove for someone who probably had lost his hand. And I say he because I'm sure it was a knight, or at least someone with a ceremonial role that required wearing armor.
So it was like a wooden hand?
It was metal.
Oh, metal. Okay.
But I haven't researched it deeply enough to know what the sort of mount for the metal is. Like there could be, it could be an almost solid object, or it could be, a glove. I don't know, but it exists now as a sculpture. I mean, it's an amazing, kind of scary and kind of Lord of the Rings-ish looking object. And I'm not saying that that the Feiners are going to make bank on it, but I'm saying that is an object that is circulating in the market that you can own. And, you could go out and you could buy a contemporary sculpture, or you could buy this crazy articulated metal hand and put it on a shelf and aim a light at it. And it's fascinating.
Let's buy some armor for our podcast.
Yeah.
I mean, why the hell not?
We'll show some armor.
This is the thing.
It is why the hell not.
Think about this whole conversation. I'm basically arguing for open thinking, right? It's like, why even think about things as old or new? I buy contemporary art. I love contemporary fashion. I love vintage fashion. I love antiques.
Right.
The world's our oyster. Again, like we're on a rock floating in space. Isn't it crazy how people are trying to always narrow their aperture instead of opening it? So yeah, it's like go all the way to the brink with contemporary sculpture, then go all the way to the brink with antique objects that can be reinterpreted as sculpture. That's a very rich life. Like, do both.
I'm so hyped right now.
We're going to go to an antiques fair. We're going to get you into, I don't know, 1980s Levi's.
Oh, I mean, the 1980s are definitely, 90s, fully
1890s
participating in the...
I want like
the
the
real
gold rush. There's still dirt on them.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
The original Levi's.
Yeah.
You just need to pull back the clock a little bit.
Speaking of clocks, we got to find some old clocks.
Old clocks? No, I mean, that's actually a really fun arena because those are more like a ship of Theseus. Clocks have to be repaired, obviously. Yeah. So those go through a lot more evolution than some other types of objects.
Okay, so I'm going to pick a thing. I just have to pick a thing and then...
Can I just be a bitch and talk about one category that I really hate right now?
Be a fucking bitch.
So Scandinavian antiques are very popular. They have been for a long time.
What's an example
the ones that are most, and I'm talking about antiques and not Scandinavian mid-century material. Imagine, it's called Gustavian, but imagine like neoclassical, late 18th, early 19th century Scandinavian antiques that are very light, very elegant, very refined looking, but instead of being like formal brown English furniture, they're painted. You've probably seen this stuff.
Okay.
Like imagine a beautiful classical dining room chair, but instead of brown, it's white. It's like white paint or baby blue paint, and it has like a gingham upholstery on the seat instead of a heavy brocade, right? It's like a very light, chic kind of look.
Right.
And it's real. And there are great Scandinavian antiques from that period that are circulating in the market. But because that look has been popular in American interior design in a kind of evergreen way since about the 80s, there are just an enormous number of fakes still being produced in Europe
Yeah.
and brought into the American market. And I'll tell you, more than any other category I look at, 9 out of 10 of the things I see are fake. And I
shit.
don't just mean
That's the advice to the listeners.
painted or repainted, just fucking
out
fake. Like every inch of it.
Yeah.
And
Do people want to be fooled though? Don't you think there's some people that like they kind of know but
For
they don't
sure.
care?
for sure, I don't know that they kind of know. I do think they don't care.
They don't
and I
care.
think in this case, you know, if you like the look and you, for whatever reason, in your like McMansion in Dallas, want the sort of aura of antiques to pervade the place, you probably don't care so much on like a fact level about what it is, but that shit is overpriced.
Okay.
And you can buy reproductions that are what they are purported to be, that look identical to these fakes for much less. So it's never to me about
You're like the
fakes are
Jim
bad.
Cramer of antiques.
I love a fake,
Yeah.
but pay the appropriate amount for it.
Yeah.
I don't like seeing people be taken advantage of.
So for our listeners who are into Scandinavian antiques, tread carefully.
Yeah,
tread
watch
carefully.
your ass.
No, and there are things to look for, and this is what you begin to notice
Yeah.
when you start looking. Patterns of wear that are not natural. Like I love when someone distresses something and they just like fucking attack like the side of it with a chain. That's not how things wear.
Yeah.
They wear at the points that are most exposed.
Right.
You know, it's going to be the top of this, not the side of this. It's going to be the edges. So look for appropriate patterns of wear. For
Be a
example,
forensic analyst now.
yeah, that's the fun of it.
To be Dexter.
Like, yeah, you have to be Dexter. You have to put on your Mac and get out your magnifying glass. I mean, it goes with your wardrobe.
That's true.
I just saw a reel where someone who's called an antique stealer, but that's a whole other topic, is actually showing off the iron hinges in a Scandinavian object. And she's talking about, you know, how old this thing is. The paint that is like on the surface of this object is slathered on top of this supposedly antique hinge, which is just, it's ludicrous. Like if this
Yeah.
thing were painted green in 1798, there would not still be green paint on the hinge.
yeah.
But also that's not how it would have been produced.
Yeah.
You know, the hinge
Do you
would have been,
comment then like fake bitch?
I have called
you-
out I've
Ooh.
called out this
Oh.
person once. Yeah.
And
Wow.
did they delete the comment?
No, I didn't. I don't do comments so much as shady stories.
Okay.
Like shady reposts and
Yeah,
stories. But it's usually without naming the person, and it's kind of diplomatic because I want to give them an opportunity to do better. I do less calling out now in my dotage, and I also think that moment has passed.
Yeah.
But I'll send people direct messages
Okay.
for
You,
sure.
you would have hated that I sold a couch on Facebook Marketplace and advertised it as MCM, Mid-Century Modern, and the couch has a USB port in it.
Do you know? I honestly think buyer beware in that
Yeah.
case.
You gotta come look at that.
Who's the poor? Did someone buy it?
Someone bought it.
Good.
Yeah.
How much did you sell it for?
$250.
Okay. If you'd said like, you know, 2,500 or
Oh,
25,000,
yeah.
then we would have talked. Then we would have had a conversation
MCM-esque.
on my stories where I call you out.
Has Instagram totally changed antiques?
Completely.
And like reels, like I guess I haven't stumbled it, but I imagine there are like crazy, antique finders and reels where people talk about like cleaning and refurbishing
Yeah.
and all that stuff.
Yeah, and TikTok. Yeah, I think that
Antique talk? Is that
and on TikTok.
And
No,
TikTok.
TikTok, did I say?
antique.
And TikTok. Oh yeah, yeah.
Yes,
And it is
antique.
called that. You know, when we look back on the history of the world, small topic. The advent of the internet
rock-
will be
the rock flying
will be
through space.
the flying rock. The advent of the internet is one of these watershed moments in history, and we don't talk about that enough. I think it's a really funny thing that's kind of like, I feel like we know that ambiently to be true, but we don't talk about it. Like our entire world changed and began changing and sort of going down a different path when the internet emerged, and one of the results of that emergence was that antiques really lost popularity for a while. And it's not about, you know, people like modern things, not old things. It's about the ease with which we can shop online for new things. I
Right.
mean, you know, it's just easier to click buy and have something delivered than to go out and find it at an auction or
Right.
at a flea market or at Brimfield.
That's why stores in New York suck. Like, there are no exciting
New York
stores.
is like there are amazing antiques dealers in New York, amazing dealers of mid-century material, but as a sort of environment, it is one of the worst places in the country to buy antiques because everything, by the time it's on this island, especially of Manhattan, it has already been thoroughly researched, cleaned, shipped around. The people who are selling it probably know what it is.
Yeah.
And so you're going to pay a premium, and there's just less stock, floating around that's really interesting.
And
But
it's
I
always
think-
at a chic designer clothing store where they only sell like 4 antiques as well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
By that point, just money doesn't matter to you. Like, and if
Yeah.
you like it, buy it. But it's like a consumer product, right? It's
Yeah,
you
yeah.
can
The
just,
markup is crazy.
the markup is crazy. But what happened with the internet is, the antiques market was sort of in this fallow period, but with the rise of Instagram and again, the sort of emergence of millennials as adults who could possibly buy things, you really began to see a turnaround. And Instagram in its infancy was really this sort of a boon to the antiques world because while a lot of dealers and museums resisted getting on it at first, the imagery of historic art and antiques began circulating and it hasn't let up. And it's become this amazing kind of infinite archive.
Let the people fetishize.
That's it.
That's what
Let
we
them.
want.
And, you can fetishize things in an imagistic way, but then hopefully once you've started living with antiques, the experience of living with those objects will become more important to you. And it will become less about the look of the thing than about the richness of living with it. But I do think Instagram helped get us there, and it
and then you have
continues
great backdrops for Instagram.
if you want to be shallow,
No, I'm kidding.
listen, you can have things that other people won't have. I mean, that's what's disappointing about hopping on a trend train is that you might be an early adopter, but if it's moving in the direction of a serious trend, then in a year or two, everyone else is going to have the thing and you're going to hate your squiggly mirror, So I think that is actually one area where it's useful for people who are kind of image focused to think about the value of antiques. If you have a really authentic object, there's only one of them. It's
Yeah.
one of one. They're also inherently more sustainable. And I think it's kind of annoying when younger people are marketed to through the lens of sustainability or when things are greenwashed. So I don't like to focus on that too much, but just inherently, just like vintage clothing,
Right.
it's less strain on the environment to like wash something and mail it rather than to produce it new and ship it. So,
And plus, we got those de minimis
oh man,
tariffs
we're in
now,
the de minimis
so-
era. Yeah,
so,
yeah.
that's reason enough to go to the winter fair and
No, but seriously, like buy a good thing once and have it for the rest of your life, or buy
Yeah.
shitty things many, many times, and the cycle never ends. And who's in control there? Not you.
yeah.
The companies that are selling to you are in control.
I'm so sold.
All right,
You've done your job. I'm so
Man,
sold.
I love
We're
hearing
I
we're
gotta
that.
take more risks, Dan.
we're antique pilled.
I'm fucking
You're
floating
antique
on this
pilled.
rock.
I've been
and
to your
I'm
house. You got to start collecting
I
something.
know, bro. I'm fucking sleep. I'm floating in this rock in space, and I'm sleeping on a
Expand
Casper
your
mattress.
mind. Expand your
You don't
mind.
even have a Toto bidet. I've been to your house. Don't even bother.
Now, you can have the Casper mattress, but put it on an antique bed. You've
Oh, yeah.
never had sleep like that. Or sex, because
Those
it's
rusty
noisy.
springs. Oh yeah.
Or not the springs, but the joints on the
Joints,
wooden
yeah,
furniture.
yeah. Creaks.
So it's a symphony.
Creaks of thousands of years. So many have fucked where
It's
you
the
were fucking.
sound of history. It's
sound
the
of-
sound of humanity.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just at a sperm clinic today, and
Great. Good way
a fertility
to. It's a good
clinic,
way to end. Sperm
and
clinic.
they had fake Eames chairs, which I thought was very this podcast.
In the waiting room or in the.
No, in the.
And the actual,
in the-
I
Okay.
forget
Wow.
what they called it. They called that room a special thing.
a special room.
It was
Yeah.
a special room, but they had covered it. I love this. They
cum
had
chair.
They'd covered the cum chair. You thought we were going to talk about cuck chairs.
Yeah, no, we're talking
We're
about
talking
cum
about
chairs.
cum chairs.
Yeah.
It's like the opposite of a
It's
cuck
the
chair.
opposite, yeah.
Because it's like the chair of, creating progeny and inserting your DNA into the history of this floating rock. But
At least into a little cup.
into a little cup. They had covered the Eames chair in, I guess, like medical grade. What do you call it? Gauze? Not gauze.
Oh, not like
they
the
covered
tissue
it.
paper.
Like
Yeah, the
like a
tissue paper,
baking
the tissue
kind of?
paper.
Yeah, yeah, the tissue paper.
So it was like, This would also be a great
With like an
installation.
Eames lounge?
Yeah. The
ottoman?
The ottoman was separated from
Because
it.
that ottoman is going to get covered. You know
Oh,
what
you
the-
know it. You know it. No. But I was thinking like this is also a great installation because it's an Eames chair, but it's fake, but it's covered in that cloth.
Yeah.
And like a ghost chair, but you can see the silhouette. And that's a fake Eames chair, but it's intact,
Yeah,
and
you
it came
can't
to no
have a real,
harm.
That's a waste of an Eames chair. That's a lot of stains
It came to no harm
on a
today.
real Eames chair. Oh, okay. Stain free.
Yeah. Although I washed my hands, and then you have
Good.
to fill
That's
out
good.
the
Go shook your
time.
hands when you came here.
You got to wash your hands, but then you have to fill out the time of the samples collection. And I got some water on the piece of paper that I was writing on, and I
Did
had
you
to
make
take
good
that
time?
paper back out to the nurse, and I was like, I promise this is water. On the paper.
Do you want to be fast or long with that?
I actually thought about that.
What's the idea?
I went for 2-3 minutes in the room.
Okay.
So I think that was probably on the shorter side, but I was like, I don't want this to be 30 seconds. Like that would seem crazy.
That's embarrassing.
You
Now
know,
you're
we're back to
relaxed.
the topic of temporality, right? And at the end of the day, antiques, historic art they were contemporary in their time. And you can even think of historic art as contemporary art that's survived through time. That's it. The only ingredient there that makes it historic is time. The thing itself was once contemporary, like my sperm.
The Eames chair should have been Siemens furniture.
Now
All
I
right.
know why you do this
All
job.
right, baby. That's a Tribe Called Quest lyric. I think we're
I think we're at
good.
time.
On that marvelous note.
Michael,
you for
where can
having
our listeners find you online?
They can find me at Michael Diaz-Griffith on Instagram. And I would be happy to review their Scandinavian purchases to make sure that everything's
if you're worried your
right.
shit's fake,
Yeah.
message Michael.
And they can buy my book, The New Antiquarians,
Antiquarians.
at Home with Young Collectors, which is available everywhere.
Beautiful
And
coffee table book.
thank you. And hopefully it gives them a portal into the world we've been discussing.
Great. I like how you really went professional again after just talking about
I'm almost
talking about
back in my
chairs.
suit. I'm out of the
Yeah.
Batsheva and back into the suit.
Yeah, next time you're at the Metropolitan Museum of Art giving a talk and you're like, I wish I could talk about cum chairs. But
I mean, I would love to go there with you guys. Maybe we go on the road and visit some museums, hit up some fairs.
Ooh,
Let's
I think
do
it'd
it.
be
I
fun.
smell a
I
YouTube
think-
video.
I think that'd be good.
Let's
do it.
All right.
All right. Bye,
Bye,
everyone.
everyone.
Thank you.
Follow us on YouTube.
Okay, that was Middlebrow.